Well, thanks for staying with us on the program this morning. One of the biggest topics much debated on in Nigeria is the future of education for Nigeria, particularly tertiary education. A lot of notions are that the quality of graduates being churned out these days are basically certificate-bearing graduates, whilst universities are saddled with the core focus on research and preferring solutions to modern-day challenges and employing labor. Most of the graduates are now job seekers bearing certificates. Now on the program this morning is the Vice Chancellor of Veritas University, Abuja, Reverend Father Professor Hyacinth Ichoku, in our studios this morning. Welcome to the program, Prof.
Thank you very much. I'm doing fine. Thank you very much. Nice to meet you.
It's a pleasure. Let's get straight into it now.
Thank you very much.
Basically, it's from the angle of having the notion that these days, most prospective tertiary education learners go there to seek after certificates. There's always this yearning for universities, even when there are other options in polytechnics, colleges of education, vocational training institutions. Why is this so in your experience of having been in the business?
Well, there are many angles to this. One is that the prestige attached to university degree as against maybe other kinds of certificates. We are increasingly in a world that people believe the bigger, the better. So why go to polytechnic? Why go to college of education? Why, when you can go to a university to acquire a degree? And also because the standards have been falling over time. And so everybody feels that they can make a degree. Why go to polytechnic? And also because even what you expect in the polytechnics, which is supposed to be more of practical, do not exist anymore in that sense. So you don't have the kind of quality even in the polytechnics because the population has grown immensely. And so as the population grows, you also see that the standards are falling. So that means then that you begin to see people who are not really qualified to be there, they begin to get in there. And of course, like every other aspect of our national life, corruption is also eating deep into that. So you could also see even somebody who is not qualified who can wangle his way into the university or polytechnic, as the case may be. So with that, things started falling apart. So that's exactly what we have been seeing over time. First, the prestige attached to university degree, and because employers also would prefer somebody with a degree than somebody with a polytechnic certificate, for example, or college of education certificate. So all those things, all those cumulatively impact on the quality you now get in the university, because everybody now wants to go to the university. So that's precisely the problem we are having today. So, but in terms of standards as well, you see, what you are also seeing is that a lot of people, a lot of students are not very qualified again. The quality of the secondary school that feed into the university system is also falling. So the quality is falling, and so all this cumulatively will give you also a big problem in the tertiary level. I mean, in the university system. That's what exactly you see. So you come into the university system. You see students who are just there because they want to get certificates, not because they have any business in the university.
Now, off the background of this falling standard of education, how does this affect or impact the future of education for Nigeria?
Oh, well, definitely. If the standard is falling, you become less competitive, in the international arena. You become, even for the productivity of your own economy, you become less competitive. So if employers are complaining of graduates who are not employable, that's exactly what they mean. that the quality has fallen to such levels. And of course, you don't also remove the issue of corruption in the university system itself, where all this issue about sorting people, sorting out, you get a grade you don't deserve, you go to the labor market, you can't prove yourself. That's also about the complaints of people. So if you have all this baggage, then there's no way it cannot affect the future. So you see that, we need complete overhaul, complete reform of the university system. Not just university system, the whole education system, in order to think about the future.
Now, let's start with the university, because as Vice Chancellor of Veritas,
Yeah.
I'd like to find out, the 2025 UTME has been much talked about.
Yes.
And it's based on the level of performance.
Yes.
Over 1.9 million candidates sat for that exam, and at first, 1.5 million, despite the technical glitches, were said to have scored below average. With such results and cutoff marks coming into question, how do universities, much like yours, approach this pool of students who are seeking to gain entrance with a less than average score, seeking some courses in your institution?
Well, you see, that's again the cumulative effect. It's not just that JAM is just an indicator of how our education system has fallen. So if this is the case that how less than maybe 21% of students only met or above the average, that is 200 over 400, that tells you the story of where the level of our education system. If a student is supposed to score 400 and he scores to 50% of that, and we are clapping that is these are the people who qualify, and lots of others are not scored below that. That means we have a lot of work to do, because eventually university system cannot just absorb the people who scored above 200. They are going to go down. Let me watch out and see when the national policy is conducted. You will see some universities that will take less than that. People will take 150. Some people will even advocate for 120. So if you scored maybe in exam you scored 30% over 100, and then you are qualified, you failed the exam, but somehow the system accommodates you. So that is the problem, that these people will still move into the university system. And first of all, the capacity is questionable now. You put a question mark about their capacity to absorb university, to really think university. So again, in that respect, you see that it is not easy now to see. And if you restrict yourself to people who just passed the exam, that is the 21%, all the universities will be empty. That's what it means. So what we're saying is our education system needs fundamental reform. We need fundamental reform. So because if you take in this into the university system with the level of failure we have had, then that also means is garbage in, garbage out. So what you'll be graduating are people who have no interest whatsoever in university system, who have no capacity to be in the university in the first place. So that's the big problem we have. So if you come down, some universities will come down to 180, some universities will come down to 170, some will come down to 160, as the case may be, just to be able to absorb this number.
Now, Prof, this overhaul you speak of and the reforms, where do we start? Do we start at the secondary school level? Do we start in the universities? And what are some of these practicable ways that we can re-engineer interest in education and up performance in examinations?
Look, the reform I see begins from the primary.
From the primary education.
Primary. We must have reinvest our interest in education. In fact, for the whole spectrum of education, beginning from the family. Interest in real education. Parents, the attitude of parents to their children's education. So that is where the problem must begin. to be sorted out. So because if you just want your child to go to university because others are, to go to school because others are going to school, and sometimes you rush them, there's this phenomenon of students not, failing exam again, or some primary schools you don't face students. Even in secondary school, sometimes the student cannot fail exam because automatically it becomes a genius if he cannot fail exam. So the reform must start from there. And let me tell you, we are talking about people who are in school at all. Are you talking about, what about the people who are so many millions who are outside of the school system? Do you understand what I mean? Look at, beginning from the attention, go to a typical government-owned primary school, for example, in any village. Think of your own village. Think of how many people, the condition of learning. Think of even the quality of people who teach them. That's where it all begins. Interest, for example, in mathematics begins from that early childhood education. And if a child is consistently taught well and interest motivated, it can do well in any subject.
Now, Prof, there's been debates following the decision by the federal government to change our model of education from 6-3-3-4 to 12-4. Now, 12 years of a child, much like you're saying, is now going to be spent at that primary level, arranging the blocks that the child would need to grow. But some of the debates in the other end were on this underage candidates with gaining admission when it is now time to move into the university. How do you think that this change in model of education would affect some of the reforms that you're looking for?
I think that is actually designed to be able to ensure that the child gets consistent education over certain age. Do you understand? To make sure that a child is consistently in education over time, and that education that prepares him for life or prepares her for life, that basic education.
Prof, let's be practical. Let's use numbers, for instance.
Yes.
So at what age now would you say that the child will now be ripe to get into primary school, to spend 12 years in primary school?
So if Of course, personally, I believe that a child should not enter primary school before age 5. But the official age is, of course, 6. You enter the secondary, you enter the primary school by 5. But of course, parents don't have time. Parents don't have the patience. They want their children to get into, because they are busy with other things, and they want the children out of the house.
So you find them as young as two
get into creche, and because it's in creche, it's assumed that 2 years, 3 years in the creche, they let them get into the primary. Others are getting into the primary, so if you want to implement this policy, implement it consistently. So if you want to say, for example, that a child enters school at age 6, and he's there for the next 6 years. What that means is that he would have finished primary 6, okay? And that's age 12, 11, 12, let's assume. Then for the next 6 years, he's 18. That's what you find abroad in most other countries. So that at that level is now mature to enter the university. I follow it. And that's why, so if the authorities are proposing a situation where a child is consistently in school up to age 18, that means the child must have gotten, basic lifestyles, basic life skills to be able to survive in the whether he goes to the university or doesn't go to the university. He can then survive. He can then, build upon other skills rather than going to university. Of course, people can go there into other forms of life, activities and skills and, professions. But moving into the university becomes a skill, becomes for those who really want to and those who have the capacity to get into the university. But some others, some others will move into other callings. You want to be a carpenter, for example, you want to be an artisan, for example, you don't need university education. you just go and begin to build your skills. In fact, you see again, the incentive, whatever you do is about incentive. If you give the people, if you give people incentive to be able to say that whether you're a carpenter, you can build your life, you can own your, you can make sense of your life. Whether you are a block layer, I mean a bricklayer, you can become somebody and you get well paid enough to be able to be a responsible citizen. You understand? You don't need to have university education to be able to earn enough income to sustain yourself or sustain your family. And that's what pushes people, because our incentive system is tied to certificates.
Now
that's a big
this has
problem.
been brilliantly put down to the understanding of anyone watching. It's my question now is on what you raised earlier, other forms of education.
Yes.
And the fact that even in the university, education is not just in the paper certification. It's said to be in character and in learning.
Basically.
But over time now, we see a lot of focus on just the learning. Hence this debates on underage candidates, and this debates on the value system, looking away from artisanal ventures and vocational studies. How do we re-engineer the concept of education being in character and in learning and dignity in labor?
Yeah, you see, for example, in Veritas University, our emphasis is not just intellectual formation of the students. You also have to think about the moral, ethical formation. In fact, the totality of formation. That's why in Veritas University, we don't have students coming from any corner of the village or community or wherever to come. Every student must live inside the university, because we believe that is the time for formation. Are you following? That character is absolutely the value system at that level is absolutely important.
The value advantage of on-campus learning.
Exactly. The value system they acquire living on campus. And because they are not just living on their own, because they are also monitored and there are rules of engagement with them. So that means the child is aware, or the student is aware, that behavior counts. If you don't behave well, if you have disciplinary issues, you cannot graduate, because you are not fit in character and learning. You may be fit in learning, but you are not fit in character. And so you can be denied graduation. So that's very, very important. Absolutely, because many places people come from anywhere, any place, and then come to lecture because the lecturer is just interested in the lecture he delivers his lecture and goes. Whatever you do after that is not his business. But that's not the case, because if you want to say that somebody is qualified in character and learning, that you are bearing BSc economics, you are bearing BS, not just because you have the intellectual capacity and skill, but also that your character is what giving you this certificate.
Now you've raised the question of Veritas University. Is this because the university is from a Catholic background, hence the need for morals in line with Christianity and the Catholic faith?
Yeah, because our founding fathers, the Bishops' Conference of Nigeria, actually their aim was not to set up a university like any other, but because of this emphasis on the moral regeneration of the students and the transformation of the students. So that's why that we have this policy in place. So the policy then makes sure that the authorities and the management are saddled not just with overseeing the intellectual formation of the students, but also the moral formation of the students. And that is basically what we do. As I said, it's not every university that can adopt this model. If you go to a federal university, it might be difficult, where you have 50,000 students and they are coming from all Canada. They are scratching to live wherever they can find off campus. You can become a cult member. Nobody identifies you. You can be carrying drug. Nobody identifies you. All you need to do is to pass exam. On the day of exam, whether you come to sit for exam or not to sit exam, nobody cares. Whether you come for lectures or not come for lectures, nobody cares. But in Veritas University, for example, if you don't meet 80% attendance, you're not qualified to sit for exam. You won't qualify to sit for exam. So, and students know it. And so this is part of the engagement. continuous engagement with the student over time. With the 4 years, 5 years, 6 years they stay in the university, they know that these are the values we espouse. And then you teach them other values. Persistence, of hard work, of sacrifice, of taking care of your neighbor, taming the greed in us, knowing that society matters, not just your personal gain. So these are some of the values you come to inculcate in the students. So that's part of the training. But as I said before, let me tell you, one of the greatest crises we are having is we are talking about those who are in the system, those who have been included in the system, maybe in the primary, those who are parents. Are you talking about the many millions
of out of school children
in Nigeria? Do you know the kind of we are planting a bomb that will explode tomorrow? And in fact, Boko Haram is just the beginning of our issue. Because let me tell you, I've traveled several states in this country, doing one thing or the other, several states in the north, in northern Nigeria, and you see, let me tell you, there are some states with less than 15% school enrollment, 20% school enrollment, and you come out in the morning hour, 10 o'clock, 12, 11 o'clock in the morning, you see children roaming the street doing nothing. Ramping around and basically doing nothing, carrying plates. Do you know what that means for this nation? Do you know what that means for this nation? The future of this country. So we are talking about the future of education. We are even talking more holistically about the future of this nation. And we are creating instability. We are creating huge instability in this country, and this country may never be stable with the way we have fashioned it. And the way, let me give you an example. I was in Katsina State. I was doing a job for the European Union some time ago. There was this accountant from Ekiti State, who was the accountant of the organization in Yobe State, and I was. I was the consultant. Okay, so I came to discuss with him, and then there was this guy attached to me as the driver, with a Hillock van. And this guy of course couldn't speak a word of English, but I mean we could talk by signs, all right. But the more worrisome thing is that one day we said he didn't have his license. We said let's go and get his license from his home, and do you know what? This young man has about 16 children at age 30. 16 children at age 30. And come and see the condition these children are living. And of course, because the house is not sufficient to contain them, once it grows up to a certain level, it goes to join their emergery. Once you grew up to a certain level, go to, and I asked myself, this young man, accountant in the office, told me he had two children, and they were all schooling in Abuja. As at that time, he was paying like 500,000 per head for a term. And you ask yourself, the children of this driver will grow up, and in this country. And the children of this accountant will grow up. Do you know the level of instability you have instilled in the country by that disparity? This one goes to join a emergency. This one goes to, will train, of course. Maybe they will be eventually, because they were in American secondary school here, you were paying so much. And the essence is to train your children to become responsible. But can you imagine that these two sets of children will live in the same country?
The disparity is very wide.
The disparity is so wide. So that's exactly what we are building, and as I said, everywhere you go, the fact that we have never gotten a solution to the problem, to the issue of out-of-school children, is a huge problem we have created.
Now, Prof, interestingly, this was one of the issues raised last year during the family planning conference, particularly with this different cultural backgrounds we have across regions of the country.
Yeah.
The North is most plagued with out-of-school children, and it comes from a background where religion also speaks against the need to plan in terms of using methods to determine the number of children you're financially capable to raise. Whilst this is now a more cultural or religious based challenge, how do you suggest solutions towards government's, would I call it orientation or approach to solving this challenge?
Let me tell you, my belief is that we have not determined to solve this problem. There are cultural orientations, cultural inhibitions, but let me tell you, the more critical issue is that we have not determined to solve this problem, to give these children education they are entitled to. If we are determined, those cultural barriers can be overcome. Culture is about educating people. Being educated. Most of the time you find that people do this thing not just because of culture or anything, but because they lack the means. They lack means. For example, a parent that gets 16 children, he has no means of training them, he allows them, okay, join a majority, and that's a relief for him because they are out of the house, out of the purview of his responsibility. So that's just the problem. So, but if the government, for example, I'm not talking about federal government, I'm even talking about state government, I'm talking about local government, talking about communities. If we determine that this has to be solved, it has to be solved. No country we don't have a problem that cannot be solved.
Now, talking about investments on the part of the government, there was a report back in 2019 that under the administration of former President Dr. Goodluck Ebele Jonathan, over 15 billion naira was invested in schools to tend for Almajiri and other out-of-school children. But as of today, most of those investments lie in rot. The houses are now used as accommodation for certain IDPs. The purpose for that investment is not being
again. That's again because we don't have the will, the positive will. A situation where you as a politician, you come back, and I saw several of it. In the morning, you have all these guys lined up in your house. You're a commissioner, you are a senator, you are a house of rep, they know. So you see every morning they line up your house and you are happy about that. You distribute palliatives to them every morning, and they come up again in the next morning and line up with their boys and for food, and you are happy about that. So it is lack of will. We have not positively determined to transform the situation. And I think that, you see, because people can sabotage such efforts as what you have said, Jonathan, and I know that Jonathan invested quite a lot, President Jonathan invested quite a lot in that direction. But then, are the elite willing to really see this process work out? If you don't see these children as your competitors in the future, if you want them to be perpetually dependent on you in the future, you don't want to see them get education. That's the point. Because you know that education is the most powerful instrument to transform a nation, to transform a society. But if some people are afraid that if these people get involved, get education like their children, then there will be competition, then there will be...
So you believe it's a deliberate effort?
I believe also that even if it's not deliberate, it's lack of willingness. That's what I call it, lack of willingness.
Because over time, poverty and illiteracy has been weaponized, and that's why you said it. That when you weaponize these things as a measure of either to gain political advantage or use it for your own economic advantage or financial advantage, then that's a big problem. That's a big problem. And I keep saying, look, I see these young people. You see the hearts of them. I said, these are potential doctors. These are potential engineers. This country is losing. Do you understand what I mean? I mean, take any of those children that you call Almajiri, take their counterpart from a rich family, compare. If you give them the same orientation, the same education, the same opportunities, I can tell you the difference will not be clear. The difference will not be clear. So the nation is actually losing a huge chunk of its human capital in these children.
And so why are we not investing in them? Why are we not investing in them? So this is just the big problem. So we are concerned about university education. That's fine. But for me, the more moral burden we bear is in these children that are completely out of school, that are not included, they are out of our radar.
Now, even for the ones, interestingly, who have some form of education, managed to go through primary, secondary, and at the gap between secondary and tertiary education, society today, with the advent of technology, social media, has been criticized as one of the distractions that young persons get somewhat distracted away from the real values of skills learning and even formal education. How would you adjudge the advent of social media and technology and the mindset of the youths these days towards morality, education, and what have you?
Well, you see, every good thing comes also sometimes with its own disadvantages, or bad sides, side effects, So I think that basically technology has been a big revolution in terms of, digital technology has been a big revolution globally, but also it has also its own downsides. Basically, we are believing that now technology is everything. It has distracted us from the original values we cultivated. And our children are no more interested in those values. They believe that technology has come to sometimes as a distraction. But technology has also come with some levels of a situation where students don't go for lectures, for example. They stay in their hostel, they stay in their rooms, glued to their handset and trying to doing all kinds of things. So it's a big distraction, but then that's part of a value-oriented institution, and that's what we keep saying, regulating how these are used among students and when they are available to be trained. The regulating how they are, these things, in some private universities you can't use
your gadgets,
the digital gadgets. So I mean, why not? It's good that they expose the students. Okay, they tell you, they use it for assignment, they can download it, fine and good, but do they have the level of discipline to distinguish when it is necessary? So you come to the class and then you find the student who is chatting with his instead of paying attention to the class. In many cases, of course, in Veritas, if you do it, you go in for it. But I mean, if you go to a public school and then the lecturer is not interested in what you are doing, he's interested in delivering his lecture, that's again the problem. So the value system is absolutely important, and how we have trained the children from home to be able to absorb those values, to know the discipline of use of some of these gadgets is absolutely important. So that's one of the things we must contend with. You must contend with it at whatever level.
Now, the world is a global village, like they say, and being globally competitive is one of the mindsets through which we groom students or even children at home as parents. At Veritas, under your leadership, there seems to be a shift in the paradigm away from the traditional classroom orientation and teaching to a more skill-driven approach to it. And how I know this is because I've interacted with some of your students who have represented the university in inter-university competitions within the country and outside the country. Is this one of the purposeful ways you're approaching the subject to curb a deficiency in skill and morality, much like you've talked about?
Oh yes. Thank you very much for opening up this discussion. I can tell you that in Veritas University, we place a lot of emphasis on skill acquisition, skills of students, not just conventional skills, but also non-conventional skills, soft skills, for example. I think that's very, very important. And one is, these young people are very, very energetic. Their minds are restless until you keep them busy. So you keep them busy with two things. First is the academic work, consistent assignments, and then projects related to the assignments, practical projects related to the assignment, but more importantly, and another, is what they do as extracurricular activities. So, and that's where we're playing a lot of, that's why you talk about, you were talking about Veritas University winning this. And yeah, of course, we have won the Pan-African Debating Championship just 3 years ago. We have won the Commonwealth Debating Championship just 2 years ago. We have also won the African Telecommunication Union Innovation Challenge. We have also seen our students perform against Covenant University and Bell University in the finals of Nigerian University, technology, STEM competition and innovation. Now, let me tell you, in fact, even just now, our students are on their way back from Ghana now, after winning the competition in debating there in Ghana, in the University of Ghana. Now, why are we open up these visitors for students to realize their potentials? Whether you are oriented towards technology, whether you are oriented towards entrepreneurship, whether you are oriented towards debating or public speaking or whatever, you find a potential, you find your opportunity, whether it is in sports, whether it's in academics. But I want to say, and that's why we have what we call a skill boot. Skill boot is a situation at the beginning of the year. We get some of these celebrities, different fields, whether tailoring, exchange, business or whatever, all kinds of fields, music. We bring them to Veritas University. It's a big investment for us. They talk to students, they mentor students. At the end, the student follows one celebrity to learn more deeply about. So that's
like mentorship.
Well, it's mentorship, and that's very, very important to us, because these celebrities also come prepared to make sacrifice to Veritas, even though, as I said, it's a big investment, but there's nothing that substitutes for that kind of skill. There are students who are, I can tell you, there are students who are in university not just for to acquire a degree, but they want to also to become businessmen. They want to become expert tellers. They want to become photo editors. They want to become something else. So you must provide a spectrum of opportunities for them to be able to realize their dream. So getting a degree in accounting, for example, may be just one thing. That's the primary thing they came to do. But getting expertise in basketball, for example, or public speaking, for example, or tailoring, for example, that's why we have the entrepreneurship department that serves every student. We have digital marketing, and we have also some MOUs with some international organizations to come groom our students in certain fields. So the idea is expose the student to a lot of issues. They may not end up, you may be a lawyer, you may be reading law, studying law, but you may not end up as a lawyer.
Practicing on the bench.
Practicing on the bench. You may have other skills that are, that all is about your personal motivation. What motivates you? So that's very important to us, and that's why we lay a lot of emphasis on that.
Now, listening to you, it sounds like there is a well-structured approach to education at Veritas, but replicating this across the country, because you had talked about a countrywide approach, there's some form of guiding and counseling that is being lost from our curriculum, even at the primary and secondary school level, where identifying interest of students is gradually dwindling down. How do we reawaken this in Nigeria? It's gradually dwindling because sometimes parents have overriding interest. They want their children to become this, they want their children to become that. So regardless of the child's
talent. So you want your child, for example, to be a lawyer. You want your child to be a medical doctor. Some prestige attached to some of these professions. Not exactly what the child desires. So I've seen a case of it didn't happen in Veritas, but I've seen a case of a student who was made to read law by the father, because the father happens to be a lawyer. And so the father, insisted that this young man must read law. So the young man went into the university. But as he was in the university, he was also doing some other thing. Basketball was his calling. So he said, so on the day he graduated, he brought the certificate and gave to the father. Father, Dad, this is your certificate. You now
I've done your will.
Yeah, I've done your will. Allow me now to go and do what I want to do. And so he went into the young man is now in the US doing something else. Basketball he plays. That is his passion. So it's all about how parents, dialogue with their children to become what they want to become. Being able to identify. It's important. Parents have a role to play. But you must be able to identify what the child needs. What is the talent of this child? Let me give you an example. I had a friend, when I was teaching in UNN. This young man happened to have traveled with his family to UK, and they were there. He enrolled the children in school, and he told me one day, when he came back, he told me, look, he came back one day. He came back. Sometimes he would take his children to the field. He had three children, two girls and one boy. He will kick football to the girl. One girl will kick back to him. He will kick football to the other girl. The girl will kick back to him. He will kick the ball to the young man, his only son. The young man will carry the ball and throw back to him. And this was happening consistently over time. And he couldn't understand it. He was frustrated with it because he thought that the young man could become a footballer. But he didn't understand it. That every time he threw the ball to him, he will pick with his hand instead of kicking back to him. And then he went into the school. But in the school, they discovered his talent, the young man's talent. They discovered his talent. And that was, they discovered that the young man had a talent for goalkeeping.
As against playing
football. And it was the white man that discovered this talent in this young man. So he was now keeping the goal for the school. And so he told me that on the day they were having school sports, and he was invited, the parents were invited to come and see. The children came, and his children invited him to come and see what they do in school. And he said he would not go, that he was not interested because he didn't want a disgrace from the son. So it was the wife that convinced him. Let's go and see what they are doing. And lo and behold, the young man was the one keeping the goal. It took a lot of patience and talent to be able to discover that this young man is talented in goalkeeping instead of kicking football. How many parents have that kind of opportunity or that kind of skill or sense to be able to identify what exactly is the talent of their children? So if you are going to persuade a child to read something, you must discover that in him. And that must rhyme with the child's interest. So it's not just enough to say, oh, you want a child to become a doctor. Does he have the talent? Does he have the skill? Does he have the motivation to be able to do that? So that's exactly the point. So it must be a joint decision between parents and so if you push a child into a course he doesn't like, or he will not basically have the motivation, and the tendency is for poor performance.
Now, Prof, very brilliantly illustrated with these real-life examples a lot of us can relate to listening to you. But the challenge with the systems we have back here in Nigeria is that not all learning institutions have the privilege of having these equipments or infrastructure, sporting facilities to allow for this talent development. Do you think that there needs to be a conscious effort on the part of governments and stakeholders in the education sector to provide this?
Yeah, again, you are coming to a very vital area, and that is the area of funding of universities. And that's, this is a big problem, and I don't have the solution. But I can say that I don't think we as the government is doing enough to fund our universities. You are creating more universities. You have so many universities that we cannot be funded. And in fact, I don't really think that these universities are in the priority of government, funding these universities. Because otherwise, why are you creating more and you still don't have funding for the ones existing? And you see, what I see in it is this: who will bail the cat? Who will bail the cat in the sense that government is afraid of introducing fees in the universities, state or public. They are afraid of introducing fees, and because of the reaction of
parents,
students. Okay, and because they're afraid. Students cannot get the quality of education they require. They don't have the facility to learn properly. You understand? That's exactly the problem. You see, because there's no omelette without breaking an egg. Somebody must pay for the dinner.
Quite interestingly, we've seen efforts by successful governments. Let's talk about the current administration and its approach to education, particularly off the back of the need to provide some sort of financial empowerment to families who do not have the capacity to send their children to school. NEL Fund was instituted, and so far they've talked about disbursing loans to over 500,000 students active across major universities in the country, most of them federal universities and some vocational institutions. How commendable is that on the scope of where we need to get to in bettering our education opportunities for Nigerian youths?
Oh, well, I can tell you that's a very big and commendable effort. At least for the first time, we are seeing the loan system in the Nigerian system of education. that allows poor students to be able to access education, at least provide themselves basic needs as they are in school. But that's just one aspect of this problem. The other aspect of the problem, and which is the most crucial, is funding the system. Funding the system in the sense that you go to the lab and you can find reagents, you can find the equipment, you can find the lecturers, you can find the technicians to be able to assist the student to learn. If you don't fund this, students' comfort alone is not sufficient. So, but this is the core of the matter. That if you are going to the lab to perform an experiment, you are sure to have all that is required for you to be able to carry out that experiment, because that is crucial. So, but if you don't have the equipment, and you must do alternative to practical, there's something missing.
There's another important part you've just mentioned now, and over time in Nigeria's tertiary education, it's been the lingering issue of the right to remuneration. ASU, SANU, NASU quite recently were at loggerheads over the sharing formula of over 5 billion released by the federal government. There's some outstanding allowances and salaries owed over a period. There's disruptions that happen, strikes intermittently over these issues. How can the federal government come to an agreement that will put this issue to rest and cut down on the number of strikes we have and the times this education is disrupted in tertiary institutions?
Over time, people, the university system has been more or less downgraded. The university system has more or less been downgraded in terms of pecking order of priority in society. You see, and that reflects in the pay package of university teachers and professors and their and the other administrative officers. So the issue is this: that if you don't pay them well, the motivation for them to be there and deliver will not be there. That is simple human reaction to motivation. So you can see right now, where a professor earns,
we don't have to name the figures. I see you're being careful.
No, so what I'm saying is, in the past, a professor was equivalent to a military general. Was ranked.
That was back in the 90s.
That was 90s, 80s, 90s, 60s. A judge, it was the same thing as a high court judge. But over time, the university professor has been left behind in terms of remuneration. And these are still the people who you expect to do research and teach our students. And so the motivation and the incentive has dwindled. And all it means then is that, look, they are not giving in their best, because they must have to look for alternative ways to survive. They have responsibilities, they have family, they have to train their children like any. So what they are paid cannot take them home, it cannot carry, so they have to find alternative sources. And so that's why you begin to hear of handouts, you begin to hear about sorting, because illegitimate means of compensation
for the poor
remuneration. So that's exactly the problem. So, but I am lucky that I had opportunity to study abroad, at least for my master's and PhD, and I had the opportunity to see I studied at University of Cape Town in South Africa, and that's one of the best universities in the world. I can tell you again. But if you see, the system is so structured that if you're a lecturer, you are not thinking of any other thing other than your lab. You're thinking about your students, you're thinking about your statistics, you're thinking about all that is concerned. All that you are thinking about from morning till night is about how to improve your system, improve yourself, write papers, publish, invent, do research, and all that. So that makes I tell my colleagues, in a small department, my small department of maybe about 10 lecturers and researchers and professors, 10 in my department, economics, 10. And you within that number, the number of publications you see from them in a year is bigger than what a whole faculty in Nigeria can produce in any Nigerian university.
Well, time, I'm afraid, is not our friend. Just before we go away from the topic, is the issue of brain drain. We have discussed the fact that our best minds and brains, and even those impacting knowledge, are attracted by better salary and pay packages outside the country. Do you see a situation where we can have some knowledge exchange to balance the playing field?
I think you are raising a very, very serious issue that I think that we need actually to have longer time to discuss. But not as short of it is this. A lot of our people, a lot of the best brains we have, in fact the best brains we have, are leaving this country. There's no doubt, in every sector. Because the economic situation is not conducive for them to survive. We are having, it's like cherry picking. Cherry picking in the sense that the people who are living are the best brains in every profession in Nigeria are the ones living, because they are the ones that are attracted outside, because they have the capacity. So say it, in any university you go abroad now, you find Nigerians all over, because the economic situation in Nigeria is not conducive for their survival. And I was discussing with someone yesterday what Donald Trump has done should teach us a lesson. With this, his reaction to Harvard. I'm not sure whether you are aware of what has happened.
The ban
on in recruitment, and that's a big lesson for us. That is not uhuru for us, because these are some of the best brains who go to Harvard, who go to MIT, who go to Oxford. And you now begin to see a government that says, look, don't import anymore, don't bring them anymore. And so that's a golden opportunity for us to come back and reverse our situation.
Well, Prof, time we need for a second part to this conversation, but I must thank you. Very objective, very brilliant opinions shared on the program this morning. I'm wishing you the best under your leadership at Veritas University, Abuja.
Thank you very much.